Welcome to Deciphering Growth, the show that explores mental health from every angle. We bring you conversations with personal opinions, stories, and practical tips. We aim to break down the stigma and help you live your best life. So please sit back and let's dive in. Before we begin, we want to remind our listeners that this podcast represents the opinions of Tiffany Graves, Eric Stone, and the show's guests. The content here should not be used as medical advice. It is for informational purposes only, and please consult your healthcare professional for any medical questions. Views and opinions expressed in the podcast are our own and do not represent that of our places of work. This podcast should not be in any legal capacity whatsoever, including but not limited to establishing a standard of care in a legal sense or as a basis for expert witness testimony. There is no guarantee regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions made on the podcast. In no way does listening, reading, emailing, or interacting on social media with our content establish a doctor-patient relationship.
Good
Yeah,
morning.
good morning,
How are you today,
indeed.
Tiffany?
I'm doing good, chilling out. Just got back from vacation, ready to dive into some hard stuff.
That's kind of the name of the game here, isn't it? Welcome back. I'm glad you had a lovely vacation. We are really excited for this topic today, and at the same time, we do want to offer a trigger warning, activator warning that we are going to be talking pretty specifically about queer religious trauma today. So if you are not in the place for that discussion today, we totally appreciate and respect that. This will be one you'll want to skip because it will be what we talk about the entire time in this episode. So real quick, if you're just tuning in with us, this is a trauma podcast for one. We try to talk about different aspects of trauma as therapists and kind of breaking down a little bit about what we're doing. So maybe you're not in therapy, maybe you've been in therapy, it's been a minute, or maybe you are in therapy and wanting some extra support and some conversations. That's the goal of this. So our last episode, we just started defining spiritual and religious trauma and some of the go with that. Today, we're going to talk about queer religious trauma because that is a piece of religious and spiritual trauma. So, one of the things to just start out in is that not every religious group has a view that doesn't affirm LGBTQ plus lifestyles. So I just want to throw that out there that this is not to say all religious or spiritual groups do this, but many of them have and do and have created some problematic experiences. So just out of the gate, Tiffany, anything that you would want to add?
No, I think that pretty well covers it. Make sure you're taking care of yourself, you're taking breaks. If this isn't something that you can listen to without being triggered, know that that's totally okay. Everyone has their points of boundaries around certain topics.
Yes. So we're going to get into some of the perspectives. We're going to say some of the things that are said, but to be clear, Tiffany and I are very pro LGBTQ plus and affirming, and that is not up for debate for us. We may, however, share some of the things that our clients have heard or some people in the community have heard just as we're in this discussion, but we're not trying to hide what our viewpoint is in this capacity. So one of the things right out of the gate is this idea, one of the traumatic experiences a lot of people in the queer community go through if they are religious is sometimes feeling forced to pick or choose. So a choice between your identity with religion, your identity with sexual orientation or gender, it can create this huge challenge. And so you can imagine that if someone's in that situation, the things being said around them are usually not fantastic. One of the cliches I'll just get right into that I have heard often is hate the sin, don't hate the sinner. That being the idea that, like, oh, no, like, we don't hate the person, we just don't approve of what they're doing. You're still hating someone, and you're hating something about someone that is not something they're choosing. It's something that is a piece of them. And so it's not a helpful piece. But as you can imagine, if you were a person and your parents are telling you that, your siblings are telling you that, maybe people you've grown up knowing your entire life are telling you that, it would be almost, I would think, impossible for that not to be traumatic at some level.
Yeah. It would be really I hate to use the word impossible because I know there's always some possibilities within the complexity of impossible, but it would be pretty close.
I I don't know how. Um, And so I'm trying to say this from a zoomed out perspective. So you're not going to hear us reference specific clients. You're not going to hear us reference specific family or friends. But we know people. We have people who have been through those experiences, and those stories are their own. And so we're not going to share them. But I am going to maybe offer some zoomed out things. There is a lovely article by queer religious trauma by Mariah Conant. It is a very helpful thing. So that kind of helped us with some of the research Tiffany and I did today. So one of the things, I'm just going to read what they have. I really like this list. Some experiences you might have had if you identify as an LGBTQIA plus and grew up in a Christian community. Being told that you can't serve in leadership because of your LGBTQIA plus identity. Hearing from leadership in your community that LGBTQIA plus individuals will be eternally condemned. Religious leaders refusing to officiate your wedding or acknowledge your marriage. People telling you that your LGBTQIA plus identity is the result of a demon possession. Church leaders stating that it was a tragedy that other teens were assaulted, but you deserve to be sexually assaulted because of your sexual orientation. Wow, that's awful. All of these are awful,
I need
but
a moment. Oh my
yeah,
gosh.
no, wow. That's,
I feel like I want to go vomit really
no,
quick.
that one, I mean,
That's
all of those are fairly awful. That one just seems
Jeez.
really horrible. There's just one more that is not better at all, but guardians or religious leaders forcing you to attend conversion, heavy air quotes if you can see my hands, therapy to change your sexual orientation or gender identity. I got to talk about this for just a few minutes, Tiffany, because it's very important. That is not therapy. As therapists, we are obligated to use evidence-based practices that improve outcomes like depression, anxiety, trauma, coping skills, behaviors. That, and I'm going to call it the name that it's given, but if you could just see the air quotes and know that I'm not calling that therapy. Conversion, air quotes, therapy is not therapy. There are evidence-based empirical reviews that show that increases self-harming, increases homicidality, suicidality, depression. It's horrible. The quickest way to explain this is, would you rather have a queer child or a dead child? It really gets to the point of like, things like this really do hurt people, like long term, but also can kill people. And it's just something that mental health is to be taken seriously. So I am offended as a therapist that is called um, therapy. So I think there's a whole different level of saying, hey, I don't really know about those choices. I'll support you. Or, hey, we don't agree. We're not going to. But there's a whole nother thing to force someone into a air quotes therapy space specifically to change their sexual orientation or gender preferences.
Yeah. Can I like hit a pause button and just like for the sake of sanity's purpose, like can we like find a different term like for for
We should.
conversion quote unquote therapy? I feel like I don't know about you, but it icks me out a little too much. Can we just like call it like the conversion bullshit or something?
Conversion bullshit feels truer. Let's look. We're doing this live, folks.
It is live.
See, I don't know, Tiffany, because I if you want to use the Wikipedia version,
Oh
um,
no.
it says conversion therapy is the pseudoscientific practice of attempting to change an individual's sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression, which is why I really like that they say pseudoscience. Um,
I'm just gonna roll with it as the conversion bullshit. Like
okay, that feels nice. I will say, I was just on the Human Rights Campaign. They have the therapy and conversion part in quotes because that's the name it's known by, but I don't think anyone is actually calling this therapy.
Okay. As I say, that is that is an icky thing to associate with therapy. Not that there's not other icky things associated with therapy, unfortunately, but
No, there is. Um, so yeah, just one of the things I just think we have to talk about that piece of it. It is actually illegal in Cincinnati to provide conversion therapy as any type of intervention. There was a lovely human being by the name of Leah Alcorn. She unfortunately this is a news story. This isn't a client of mine or Tiffany's. If anyone doesn't know who it is, but Leah unfortunately had some was just really needing help, and rather than get help, her parents sent her to conversion therapy. The therapist did not help them. And then unfortunately, Leah died by suicide. So this is all like public news type of thing, but conversion therapy is banned within the city limits of Cincinnati. So it's not something that any therapist should be providing. So we are a Cincinnati based podcast, so we know a lot more about Cincinnati, but that, I'll be honest, is one of the proudest things I have of being a resident of Cincinnati is that it only took one person in that scenario, and that was the pretty much immediate response to the dress.
this is maybe a little sidetrack slash totally potentially off topic. But am I crazy in that I not too long ago in one of our, not trying to out anyone or anything, but one of our
No.
public forums saw someone asking for conversion type therapy referrals?
Yes,
Okay.
you're correct.
So like, okay.
Um,
Humor me.
if you're doing it, you can't do it in Cincinnati.
So like if you
And
go outside
I
Cincinnati, it's legal?
technically yes.
Oh, okay.
So I'm up in Butler County, so lots of lots of things out this way. But I really I just and I think it's a good discussion because some people don't know. But I just really want to stress how much of therapy being good and helpful is off of it being mostly a choice and some engagement and finding space. And so there are other situations where someone may be mandated to do therapy, maybe a legal requirement or a hospital or under 18, type of thing. But just really can't stress enough that even if you are someone that doesn't have the viewpoints of affirming LGBTQIA plus individuals, I really want to challenge you about, would you rather your child be around and in that range or gone? And if you really aren't worried about them being gone, or even have said or thought in your head, I'd rather them be gone than that, I really want to challenge you to look at your humanity because
Mhm.
you are called to love your children no matter who they are, what they're doing. And so that's kind of problematic. And so I would argue that if you're viewing things that way, that's not about your children at that point. That's about you and maybe your reputation or how you're viewing something or your experience. Um, so I mean, I doubt anyone is going to listen to this, Tiffany, and get through this whole point, but it's just we all as people can support other people. And honestly, you and I sit every day with damage that has been done from parents as therapists, just being very honest. And so even if you're not perfect and you don't know, it is so much better to stumble and try to figure it out than it is to just, make these black and white statements and say no, type of thing.
Yeah.
So sorry, Tiffany. I'm a little
No, no,
passionate. I'm trying to stay in a
you're
productive
totally
range,
fine.
but
I
go
was
for
just
it.
gonna throw some statistics on top of that in terms of like individuals who are forced to go through conversion therapy are 8 times as likely to attempt suicide. Nearly 6 times as likely to report high levels of depression, more than 3 times as likely to use illegal drugs, and more than 3 times likely to be at high risk for HIV and STDs, all because they're being forced to do this terrible conversion
Yeah.
bullshit, quote unquote, therapy.
Yeah, and I will just say, sometimes those stats are used, Tiffany, to argue that being queer is a negative, and it's absolutely not. The reason those statistics are the way they are is that a lot of almost everyone in that community has faced persecution, mostly all of them, still can be fired in some states legally, um, still can not be supported, can be kicked out of their community, their families. I mean, that is why you're going to see an increase of like some of those behaviors or healthcare outcomes. So I just and I it's just funny that we could look at the same stats and come to a different meaning. So I just want to kind of give some context. Not that you're saying that, Tiffany, but I have heard those same statistics used to show, oh, see, it's a problem when that's I would argue that's not the problem. That is a symptom of the problem that there is not enough support and access to things for that community still.
Yeah, yeah, no, and I hope it didn't come across that I was trying to, like, be pro. I'm definitely not pro any of that.
Oh, no, no, absolutely you did not. I'm just adding some context because I just want to make because I just know when we sit in conversations like this, it's very activating, brings up some energy. And so I imagine those of us who are going to listen to this and sit in conversations like this, it just doesn't take much to spark that energy, that powder cake as we're
That's
going.
true.
Um, so one of the things I just want to throw out and share is that even if let's say you're a queer and I am a Christian, so I'm talking from my religious experience because I can speak more to the nuances, but there are other faith groups and this would be a similar challenge. I'm not trying to say this is only within Christianity, but it's not uncommon for people to have a fear of going to any church as a visitor if you're in the queer community because you don't know what the stances are. There are some websites that are like trying to advertise which churches are queer friendly or affirming. Um, but I'll be honest, a lot of churches try to not answer these questions. They try not to address this because they don't want to deal with the pushback that they get when they make a stance on either end. So it's very actually hard to find out this information, to be honest with you. You have to really do some research and digging. And if you're not someone that has the time to do that, but you need extra support and you want to tap back into your cultural or religious group, that's just tough.
Yeah, yeah. I can imagine it's almost like looking for a needle in a haystack and trying to find a religious or spiritual connection while also embracing like your true self in that aspect.
Yeah. And I don't want to say that every queer Christian has trauma because there are so many supportive spaces in it. There's actually a growing just all the time different movements saying that affirmation is a part of the beliefs and it's not a problem. So
Mhm.
I want to go back to the article I grabbed from Mariah Connaught because there's just something I think that can be really helpful. They word this very well. For LGBTQIA plus individuals who grew up in Christian faith traditions, they may not have experienced little t religious trauma or big T religious trauma. Maybe you didn't experience a big T trauma because you didn't have a difficult coming out experience or you weren't sent therapy. Maybe you carry little t trauma because your father frequently made comments about how you were too feminine or not manly enough to be a man of God. Negative messages from your religious community can also lead to internalized cisexism and heterosexism, internalized homophobia, or internalized transphobia. So, all that's to say is there's this spectrum of maybe experiences, but even if you had we'll call them little t traumas. If you had a bunch of little t traumas, that can in itself be traumatic and be a challenge when we're trying to work through some of the pieces of things.
Yeah. So I think at least what I'm hearing is essentially
So,
like it doesn't have to be necessarily classified as trauma. We can all have difficult and hard experiences.
yeah, and something I've said to many clients is that it doesn't matter if someone has it worse than you or easier than you. The most traumatic thing you went through is the most traumatic thing you've went through, and if it impacted you, it's like what you can say it didn't, but if you know that it has, it's like part of the steps to healing, which is kind of some of the things we've been talking about, is having some conversations about it, is doing the work to see what's going on.
Yeah. And I'm a little curious. I don't know if you've ever encountered this, but have you ever had individuals, either clients or non-clients, where they express, just not wanting to use the term trauma, like having their own verbiage for their experiences, because trauma in itself, like the word, can carry so much stigma within that community.
Yeah. No, every day. I mean, maybe not like maybe not someone every day says that to me, but I can think of a client every day where we've had that conversation about going. I think as therapists, one of the responsibilities we have is to be very mindful of our language. So you could imagine if I come to you, Tiffany, as a client, and I haven't labeled those things as traumatic, but I tell you about some of the experiences and you're like, oh, that sounds traumatic. That can be therapeutic and a great intervention. But if I'm not, you probably have to fill that out of how much can you label as traumatic or going. So it is kind of like we have to customize, I think, therapy to the person, which is what we're obligated to do. So that's a great questions, but I would say oftentimes people haven't gotten that validation that that was traumatic what they've gone through, and I usually have people downplay
Mhm.
how hurtful or hard that was, and then when there's like a space to talk about it, um, so like we can say something was traumatic, but not say it's still bothering us. But I think to acknowledge that some things weren't okay can be very healing for a lot of
Yes.
people.
I know it's kind of cliche, but it's
I've
okay not be okay. Feels very permanent.
Yeah, I mean, I just think about like just there's different communities where there's some strong like I just think of the military. I work a lot with veterans, and so I've worked with queer veterans before, and so it's not always something that comes up, but it can come up as a piece of like their experience and journey, and so it's just something that um can be tricky. Um this may sound strange, but there's a lot of uh see, you can let me know if I land this one, Tiffany. It is not the same level of trauma as someone being in the queer community and going through this in any capacity as we're talking about this. In some circles, if you even have a view that is not anti, like aggressively anti, you're an
Mhm.
outlier. If you're neutral, you're an outlier. And if you're a Christian, identifying as a Christian, and then also supportive in an open way, it can just cause some things. I think things have moved a lot better. So I'm not saying that's a big T trauma, but there are certainly people who call me Eric the Heretic, which is for sure my D&D name. Let's just be clear. That's so awesome that it's for sure my Dungeons and Dragon character name. We don't have time for that, but I straight up have been called that before only because of throwing out some things of like maybe there's not one set way to view the Bible, and
Mhm.
oh, I don't know, there's like 7,000 different denominations of Christianity, all because they view some things differently. So maybe, just maybe, there's not one way to view this book and live our lives out. Maybe, just maybe. I'm being very sarcastic because the person who called me that knows who they are, and they very much like there's only one thing, this is it.
Mhm.
And it's, you know, kind of challenging to counter that when it's like there is no other perspective than this one. So it's like you can't really have a conversation if that's what someone is saying.
Yeah, it's almost like getting stonewalled. Of which, like, what's the point of interacting with this person if there's only one way to
Yeah.
conversation?
It's good, I think, to stretch people and try to make people
Mhm.
with
More
different
flexible.
things. But anything you would add at all, Tiffany, to this? I know I'm kind of giving some different things.
No, I think, in terms of what you were talking about, it's very good to challenge people to be more flexible in their thinking. I think we just want to make sure that we're encouraging people to open their own flexibility window versus like
Mhm.
trying to forcibly pry that window open, if that makes sense.
It does. I will share for myself. I'm just going to be a little vulnerable in the space. I feel I did not always believe things the way I do now. And what was so helpful for me was being around people who were willing to have some respectful conversations with me because I honestly didn't really know why I did. It was just what I was around all the time. And I'm very grateful for those conversations, very grateful for people that showed me grace when I was just I'm calling myself ignorant. I was ignorant. I had not done a lot of things, and because of that, I was able to support people I care about, and obviously get more into this work. And so that's the only thing I would maybe throw out. It's quite the time in the world to be having a conversation like this, but very rarely do we change our mind when confronted with,
Mhm.
hey, you're wrong. Truly, they've done like social psych studies on this. Like, even if you know you're wrong, like 2 plus 2 is 4, no, it's 5. Even if you're in the face of that, when you're shown that, it makes you double down. And there's lots of
Mhm.
ideas to why, but I'll be honest, it doesn't feel very good to admit that you're wrong. It doesn't feel very good to think, "Oh, I've hurt people." And so it is challenging. And so I want to be very clear. I am not talking to the queer community right now that you need to go out and like take this on and sit with everybody's, that's not what I'm saying. But allies, I am calling out every queer ally that's in a religious community. Like that is the part we need to be doing to support other people. It should not be on the people within the community to have to explain those experiences and be mini experts and all. Like we got to do our own work for one, and two, we that's how we can use our privilege, in my opinion, to assist others and make things better and create safe spaces. Because man, it stands out. It stands out if you don't know anyone that's within that group that has a certain type of perspective.
Yeah. And there's something I want to add that really stuck out to me as you were talking is like the ignorance piece. Because for me, I was like, oh no, I'm right there in some degrees because like I didn't start out
Mm,
working primarily with the LGBT community, and there's
yeah,
definitely a lot that I still like have to educate myself on and learn, um, and things of that nature. Like I won't lie, I didn't realize that conversion therapy was still
yeah,
legal outside of Cincinnati. That to me was like, oh, holy crap! This is way more stressful and prevalent than I realized as I'm, working to educate myself further in this field.
yeah. I appreciate that. Just honesty, and it's we can, it's a lot of things to keep up with in the world and a lot of things to go. And I do just want to say that sometimes within Christianity specifically, um, there's just a lot of fear that if you go to a non-Christian counselor, that they're going to
Mhm.
try to convert you to a different faith. And so I just want to say that in this conversation that if you go to therapy, we are to incorporate your beliefs. We are not to impose our own. We are to monitor ourselves and ensure that there is a space. So um, that's part of the experience. Why I and so many others call it conversion, air quotes, therapy so much is that like there is evidence to show that that's hurtful. It would almost be like, I don't know. I just think about car seat recalls, and it's like, hey, you can't use that car seat anymore. They literally, and this is the dad life of me talking, but they have these sensors that basically show on, like, not digital, but like, hey, this car seat's been in a car accident.
Mhm.
You can't use them, type of thing. And so, like, if we are that paranoid about, hey, this causes harm to a child, even just a few, that's too many, then we should be bringing that approach to mental health. And so, you may not want to support your child in that space. And I guess you can make that choice, but it's a whole nother thing to do something that is literally putting them in harm's way. And that's where I'm just like, even if you're a person or family member that doesn't affirm, it's a whole nother thing to go out of your
Yeah.
way to put them in a harmful space. Like, I mean, to a space where their life is in danger doing some of those things.
I think it's really like as we're continuing this conversation talking about, I think it's extremely disheartening to think that someone would be okay placing their child or a loved one in that position over simply being a little bit more open-minded about having a therapist who, we have no agenda to push religion or spirituality unless that's what you're seeking, to start there first and just give it a chance, being open to that chance.
Yeah, yeah. I think the challenging thing, Tiffany, is that some religious communities are very progressive, and so it's like this isn't an issue at all. And there's a lot of like ripples of like movements needing to catch up. And so I've seen some positive changes of just like openly hateful things to more like, okay, we're not affirming, but we're going to like be a new. So there's growth, but growth is always very slow. But I just, if you're in the queer community, I hope that you know, regardless of your religious beliefs, whether it's Christianity, Islam, Judaism, that you don't have to pick between that and your religion. That's a you being a part of something. You get to choose that. And there are groups within all of those
Mhm.
major religions that are affirming. They may be harder to find, may not be as widely available as the others, but there is a space. And so I guess maybe just if you're like kind of like I don't know how to support my child, I think like I don't know what's going on. Like therapy is still a very helpful thing. We're just talking about types of therapy. We're still talking about how to help them. Like for example, if you're doing this is well, let's
Mhm.
just dive in. If you're under 18 and you're engaged in any of like the medical treatments to like blockers to different things, I'm not going to try to pretend to be medical fully for a second. Therapy is a requirement of that. You have to be in therapy. In those therapy sessions, you cannot just be steering. It's not this going because it's just I don't know if this is fair to say, but I feel like it is. A lot of the people with the hot takes, I guarantee, have never had a child go through that or know anyone that's gone through that because the protocols in place are quite rigorous and they're quite intense and so like there's just not all these extreme cases that are thrown out as like scenarios to oh this is what's happening. There's 4 year olds. It's not what's happening. It's not. Like that's just that there's a reason they're not showing articles and things. It's because that those situations aren't happening because no one's operating that kind of way. So I think why we're going to keep talking
Yeah.
about this and one of the things we're going to just keep following up on is religious trauma and queer religious trauma, maybe in several episodes, maybe kind of spread out, is just these are important conversations. And Tiffany and I have this conversation a lot off mic that like we have the privilege of being therapists. And so we talk to other therapists a lot. We are in sessions. So we get to have these conversations. We get to see different ways they play out so many times. But if you're listening, you might not have the chance to do that if you're not a therapist, or even if you're a therapist and don't have clients that you're not maybe getting to have these conversations. And honestly, we need to be having conversations like this. We need to be engaging and doing that exploration to see what the possibilities are.
Yeah. Keeping that, as possible, that ongoing conversation about growth and the best way to support people.
Anything you'd want to add to this, Tiffany, at
Um,
all?
let's see. I think that covers most of the points that I had because I only had a few points.
Well, we appreciate you all being here so much. And again, we've loved some of the discussions we've gotten to have. So please keep giving us the feedback. We're really excited to continue some of these conversations. And if you have things you'd like to hear more about or learn more about, please just feel free to reach out and let us know. But we do hope that this has been a helpful conversation and we would love your feedback on it.
Yes, and if there's any topics you want us to dive in more, or you want us to get a little bit more spicy about, feel free to hit us up.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of Deciphering Growth. We hope you found our conversation helpful and insightful. Subscribe to our podcast for more episodes and check out our Patreon for more content. Don't hesitate to contact us on social media if you have any questions or comments. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep growing.